Welcome, new Templars. I'm 𝕯�𝖚 aka 145, the map maker. We have got an action-packed video and a little bit of a teaser. I don't like to say dates, but a lot of people are talking about that there is going to be a big boom this week, or possibly multiple big booms. You can call it the MOAB, the mother of all bombs. And what could this be? Well, we have some key dates coming up. The 17th is obviously a Q day. Trump has just announced that he's going to be doing a presser tomorrow evening at 9. And there's just a lot of chatter. Like, there's something in the air. Even people that don't follow the news. I just talked to my friend who's very psychic, and she's like, I'm feeling like something's coming really soon. So it's like all this tension has been building. And as you know, I didn't do a video last week. I felt like there wasn't so much happening. But when there's a period of quiet like this, sometimes it's leading up to something big. So between the 17th, the 18th, the 19th, and the 20th and the 21st, I was going to get to this at the end, but actually maybe it just comes to it now. You know, there's a lot of things coming up. So the 17th is Trump's announcement. The 18th is the closest that 3i Atlas, the comet or possibly spaceship, will be to Earth. So possibly, oh, you know, it's not really that close, to be honest. It's not like it's making a close pass, but it's the closest on its trajectory to Earth. Something about the energies may influence Earth, perhaps, you know, could trigger some geological events, possibly. And then the 19th, Friday, we have the Epstein file potential release. Well, supposedly release. You know, I say potential only because we don't know how redacted it will be or not. And some people have noted that it's interesting. They have pushed the Epstein file release until the day of the beginning of Saturnalia. So that could have occult significance, even for the white hats. And then, you know, going into the 21st, the 20th and the 21st is winter solstice, which a lot of people say represents dark to light. So could be an interesting week. Now, I may be putting my foot in my mouth if nothing happens. We have had so many nothing burgers over the past 8 years. But, you know, slowly these things do happen. And sometimes there really is a breakout. So we'll see what happens this week. I don't want to hype it too much up for the future, but we're going to get to that in more detail later in the video. And of course, it could be something else as a total surprise. A couple other things it might be is possibly related to, at least for Trump's announcement, possibly related to Venezuela and possibly related to election integrity, or the statement 2020, it's not over yet, which we have heard Juan 𝕯𝖚𝖚 repeating over and over and over for 5 years now. I can't believe he's still saying it. I mean, to me, 2020 is like over, done, archived. But for some people, it might not be done. And I mean, I hope it's not done. I hope we sometime get justice. And if Trump does do an executive order related to election integrity, an order mandating paper ballots nationwide, banning voting machines, could be very interesting. Could see that announcement tomorrow and possibly some kind of retaliation or, you know, protest or civil unrest related to that in the following days. So it should be a very interesting week. You know, I didn't want the main subject of this video to be MOAB this week that we don't know about, but since something does feel like it's coming, it's worth mentioning. And, you know, we'll bring you guys up to speed on everything else that has already happened, which is much easier to report on than the future for most of the rest of this video. So the other thing I wanted to talk about in this video, as you probably see in the thumbnail, is Nick Fuentes. So we're going to go into that in detail, followed by some of the latest developments regarding Venezuela, some of which just broke today. Then I've been just looking at, of course, you know, when I'm not making a video, I'm always looking at news, and I'm aggregating the articles that I find interesting to build the bigger picture. And so I have a handful of articles which I call MAGA qualms, which is things that people are a little bit apprehensive about the administration and this agenda, things that have been coming out and being revealed, including the National Defense Authorization Act, which of course gave money to Ukraine and Israel yet again, and what's being called a seed oil bailout. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Now, I have another handful of articles that I'm calling bullish on MAGA, which of course I am more bullish on MAGA than having qualms with MAGA. I do have my qualms, but overall, I would say the direction's positive. And of course that we're watching a show, and a lot of the negative stuff is theatrics to elicit reactions and public awakening. What I would include in bullish on MAGA is our next subject, which is disclosures on physics and cryptids, which has been in the mainstream media, which we'll get to, including the upcoming film by Steven Spielberg, which I think the trailer was released today. I've started watching it, but I haven't finished it. And the title is something about disclosure. So there's more disclosure in the entertainment coming as well, but there has been some interesting disclosures in physics and cryptids in the actual mainstream media that I'm going to get to. And then minor subject, don't hold your breath for this one, but the Bondi Beach shooting. We've had several little shootings recently. Brown University shooting, which I really know nothing about. I'm honestly so over the shootings and the false flags and even trying to decode them. We never get to the bottom of any of them, but I will mention Bondi Beach later in this video. And then lastly is the Hollywood stabbing of Rob Rainier, which we'll go into a little biography, a little eulogy of him, which sounds like he was a big old dirtbag. Surprise, surprise, of anyone with power in Hollywood. Most likely part of the pedo club that we know they are all a part of. So that's sort of the itinerary for this video. Can't believe that just the itinerary spent 7 minutes, but we went into a little of the final subject, which is the MOAB this week. So I want to get first in deeply here into the Nick Fuentes subject. And so we have a little bit of a different layout tonight for the video. I'm trying it, I'll call this Tucker Carlson style with the image here and my face still big. So I'm the reporter now. Like I'm bigger, I'm more important than the article anyways. So Nick Fuentes, you know, love him or hate him, you can't avoid him. I was not even following him before all of this publicity he's gotten recently. Seems like really exploded a lot more since the Charlie Kirk shooting. I'm not sure why, how he's, you know, at all related to that, other than that he talks about it. But he's had some high profile interviews lately. And I already mentioned him in a video recently, but since then he has done Tucker Carlson, which is not as big as when he was on Fox News, but it's still, you know, one of the most, I would say even the most respected right-wing podcaster or commentator. Can't really say news host anymore because, you know, I'm not sure what Tucker Carlson's numbers are now since he left Fox News. He was the most popular right-wing news host on Fox News. And then a lot of those boomers, including my father, I have to say, have not followed him onto his podcast. They just still watch Fox News. They just watch Jesse Waters instead of Tucker Carlson. It's like these boomers are more loyal to Fox News than, you know, the people that are actually watching on there. But either way, Tucker Carlson was a huge podcast to bring Nick Fuentes on. And even more recently, Nick Fuentes went on Piers Morgan, which was, I have to say, a complete shit show. It's like, Piers Morgan, why do you invite someone on your podcast just to literally scold them? I would never invite someone on my podcast that I completely disagreed with all their opinions, just to have them state their opinion, and you state basically like the legacy deep state PC attitude, and, you know, try to just rebuke him when literally I think most people watching that interview, well, I'm not sure what Piers Morgan's audience is actually like. I can't even really say I've heard of him, I could recognize him, but I don't even know even his complete background. I would imagine he's been on literally every network in his past. You know what I mean? If you look up his history, he is a dinosaur. All of his opinions are that of a dinosaur. Now, I'm not saying I agree with Nick Fuentes, but, you know, I watched that entire interview. Unfortunately, I will never get 2 hours or 2.5 hours of my life back from that, nor from the Tucker interview, which covered a lot of the same subjects. But it's concerning to me, and I really feel like the alt media is becoming a very boring Jerry Springer style shit show of just fights between all these different personalities that I believe are all controlled agents. Now, I won't say controlled opposition because it's almost like a new version of Mockingbird Media, but run by the White Hats. And now, of course, I also believe that the White Hats are controlling a lot of the old Mockingbird Media outlets like New York Times, NBC, even though they're still liberal leaning on their surface. They're publishing things nowadays that they would have never published in the past had they been full on deep state. But we know the White Hats are essentially controlling many things now, from the left-leaning outlets to many of the right-leaning outlets. Not this one, I can say genuinely. I believe I'm one of the very few that's a genuine citizen journalist. But, you know, it seems like all these possibly or likely white hat controlled, I don't know if I'll call them truthers, but right-wing influencers are just in a catfight with each other, all insulting each other, at the same time, all bringing each other on each other's podcasts. And it's just kind of creating a closed loop of drama that has very little to do with real world events. You know, there's drama with Candace and Erica Kirk. I'm not going to talk at all about Erica Kirk. I mean, that's just a mess. That's just like, I was done with her the first time I saw her. My big conclusion from all of this, like, why is Nick being brought on podcasts that literally hate him? It's like, why bring someone on that you hate just to scold them and look like an idiot? As what I'm saying to Piers Morgan, it would seem the only explanation for this is that Nick is being groomed for a higher office and possibly even for president. So Nick Fuentes for president. And of course, he was asked this in some of these interviews, and he says, no, I have no political aspirations, but from the level of publicity he is getting and how radical his statements are and how they're all really statements about how to run a country, that it would just make sense that this may be like a long-term goal for the Republican Party. And I even said it when Charlie Kirk got assassinated, that a lot of ways it looked like Charlie Kirk was being groomed as a presidential candidate. And when he died, it seemed like in a lot of ways Nick took his place as like the spokesperson for like the Zoomer generation. And while he's saying he's not going to run for president, it seems like there may be some serious political ambitions there. And at the very least, he's setting the agenda of what the younger generation wants in a political candidate. That older political candidates, maybe before it's his time to run, may have to consider some of these new conceptions or new ideas that these Zoomers are being taught by Nick Fuentes. And, you know, these are young, impressionable people that they see him, he's funny. Some of the things he says make sense. And even though I agree with some of them, I really don't agree with the way he's presenting them. I think it's actually really lowering the bar for citizen journalism by promoting rage bait and rewarding rage bait on the biggest platforms. So it's like, would I have a bigger podcast if I just dropped the N-word this whole time and was extremely anti-Semitic and misogynistic? Not that I even agree with that or that's what I believe, but, you know, I try to be respectful. And I think everyone should kind of try to be respectful. You can be respectful without acquiescing to the liberal mentality. Because, you know, I may have Jews that watch my show. I may have Black people that want to watch my show, and I'm not trying to offend them. You know, I have somewhat avoided certain subjects of stating my full opinion, perhaps, but like, there's really no reason to ever use like really, you know, the N-word. There's no reason you have to use it on a podcast when you're trying to report the news. And so I think it's strange that the White Hats are adopting this strategy of promoting this individual that's so inflammatory, even though, you know, some of his positions on immigration and race, like maybe do align with this administration's in some ways, that these things need to be brought under control, that it's been out of control for many, many years. I'm not gonna say like maybe since for how long, but it's definitely with bringing all these Muslims like into Minneapolis, like this may even go back to the civil rights movement of things that have gone awry in this country, how we've ended up here, like with the projects and with the crime. But there's ways to say it that I think are respectful and ways to say it that are making light of it, perhaps, or just rage baiting, essentially, that can inspire violent acts like what we see in Bondi Beach, and so it's tough for me to say. It's like I watch Nick's podcast and some things I agree with, other things I'm like, that's just unnecessary. But the arc of the Piers Morgan interview essentially went from race, which Nick has made statements saying that, Black people should be in jail in general, to anti-Semitism, with Nick affirming, well, and with the race thing, he affirms he's racist. He says, yes, I am a racist, which, I mean, is that the bar we're setting here in the, I'm not going to even call him the truth movement, but whatever, I guess you call him the far right movement. That's not the bar I'm trying to set on this channel, at least, but I would like to have maybe like a more open conversation about it, but I think you have to do so in a little bit more of a sensitive manner, And so when they proceed to anti-Semitism, like his statement essentially like Hitler is cool. And so that's what we're teaching all the Zoomers now, Hitler is cool, which, I mean, I'm all for questioning history, learning more about history. But it's like Nick Fuentes doesn't go into the detailed history of it like the way like Mike King does and like really make sense of it. But either way, I think there's been a lot of deception. A lot of deception in the opposite direction of everything just turned red here. A lot of deception in the opposite direction of obviously like hammering the Holocaust and slavery into our brains. I just think it might be going a little bit too far in the opposite direction of what we have all learned growing up, including that everyone is equal, that everyone should have like equal rights. And, there's cases where like that might not actually work, and that like diversity is our strength. Like there's definitely cases where that doesn't work. And, we're seeing that in a lot of European countries that have had like really unchecked immigration for way too long. And the third point in the Piers Morgan interview was his misogyny and his non-existent sex life, which I don't know why his Tucker interview and the Piers Morgan one all comes down to like his own sexuality and his, non-existent dating life, but it's very strange. But the scariest part of all of it is that in the end, Piers Morgan, the side arguing for like the legacy perspective, by far looks so much more stupid. So it's really presenting like a very extreme dichotomy. Like either you're on board with all of the legacy, Holocaust, slavery, Black Lives Matter, or you're like complete opposite, like so far on the other extreme. And, I think there's a way for everyone to like get along and be happy. That's not like, a holy war between all the races and all the different religions. Like there needs to be a little bit more of a middle ground. But, extremity is what gets people's attention, and it's what maybe gets more views. So I'm not going to like go too far extreme just to get more views or anything, but it's just kind of disappointing that that's where independent journalism is kind of heading. So, at the same time, I do understand a lot of Nick's views and in ways agree with them. I just don't agree with his delivery of them, because like, how are we not supposed to be having become more xenophobic and more racist with the direction our country and other countries have gone, including with who the Democrats have elected to office? Like this individual, you guys may or may not know, but there was even an impeachment attempt against Donald Trump this week by this individual his name escapes me. He's not the most important congressman, but he was the same one that interrupted Trump's State of the Union address, screaming and waving his cane. And, obviously he's African American, he's black, he's loud, obnoxious, just exemplifying everything that people don't like in a congressperson. And then there's this one who just tried to impeach Secretary Hegseth and Robert RFK. This guy elected a House representative from Michigan who has like tattooed eyebrows, and he speaks like he's fresh off the boat from Vietnam. Like, I'm not sure, he's like Thai or something, but I'm just like, I'm not saying we should have like an all-white country, but like it's gotten a little bit out of control. And so it's like we come down to this type of a meme where it's like, at this point in the conversation, like, you're either, as Caucasians, you're either going to get called racist for fighting for your own race's survival, or you're going to get ethnically cleansed. And that's really how it feels. That's kind of like what Nick's been saying. I just think like you need to sort of phrase it a little more strategically here. Like, if we have a plan for the people trying to conquer us, like, we might want to keep it like secret. You know what I mean? So I've looked into, been asking AI about some statistics, just to, not to like prove I can be racist too, but, you look into the statistics in prison and the statistics about murder. I don't think racism has as much to do with race as it does to do with safety and violence. And the fact that, our prison population is 40% black, whereas blacks are 10% of the population of the country. And when you look at murder statistics, black people are killing each other far more than they're killing white people. And actually, black people kill each other 7 times more than white people kill each other in the United States. So it's a question I don't think it's just culture or circumstances. Honestly, like, I believe that when these slavers like brought slaves from Africa to America, even when these colonists, like when all these European nations colonized all these different African countries, in a lot of the ways that violated in Star Trek and in galactic law, what you call the prime directive of like bringing more advanced technology to a less advanced people. Like these, despite Darwinism saying that the human race came from Africa, like this should be like the most advanced continent, is clearly not. Like, I think in a lot of ways, these people like weren't ready for a lot, like the way that Western civilization has developed. Weren't ready for the weapons, weren't ready for the responsibilities, the mathematics involved in keeping your, account and your bank and your affairs in order. And something's not working, you know what I mean? And we were taught that we're all equal from the civil rights movement forward. I think everyone should have, all life forms on Earth should be respected, but not everyone is equal intelligence, and not everyone has equal potential or capabilities. And so we just need to keep these things in mind. And I think that's all I'm gonna say about that for now. Just to say, like, I do agree with a lot of what Nick says, but not everything he says. And I think his delivery needs to be polished a little bit. But hey, he's up to 500,000 subscribers on Rumble. So maybe he's doing something right and I'm doing something wrong, and I should just be dropping the N-bomb left and right, and I would be doing a lot better. But I'm gonna stick to my own principles, and that's what we're gonna do. So moving on to Venezuela. It was last week. Well, we know that the military has been blowing up these drug boats. There's been a lot of footage of that, a lot of controversy over that, surprisingly, which I don't feel like should be controversial at all, considering how much drugs and fentanyl they're bringing into this country that could potentially kill hundreds of thousands of Americans. But the shift in policy last week came on 12/11 when an actual oil tanker was seized in the waters. Now, officially, Pam Bondi said that this boat was sanctioned due to its involvement in an illicit oil shipping network supporting foreign terrorist organizations. So that was like a sanctioned boat, and our military simply commandeered it. Now, I think it's not unreasonable to wonder if maybe there was other things going on this boat. Not all drugs are transported on like open air little like dinghy boats like we've been seeing. There's been news articles in the past about drugs being transported on JP Morgan owned freight ships that are actually docked in America. So I'm actually somewhat surprised that we didn't hear more about what was actually on this oil ship. I mean, officially, as from everything I've read in the mainstream, you know, it's only oil that's supposedly sanctioned. But, you know, there was definitely in the truther circles questions about drugs, human smuggling. I even saw people bringing up the images of when the freight ship was jammed in the Suez Canal and they spelled out "thank you" on the surface in shipping containers. Even though that's not exactly irrelevant, it seemed that such a, as you see here, this like rescue or the SEAL Team 6 or whoever special ops that boarded this ship via helicopter, it's like they don't do this just for sanctioned oil tankers. It's like this seemed like there was something much more involved, like some sort of strategic cargo on board that made a more important situation than just a sanctioned oil tanker, essentially. But they haven't revealed anything, so everything there is simply speculation. Until that is today, when Trump put out a tweet today, 12/16, saying Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever amassed in the history of South America. It will only get bigger, and the shock to them will be like nothing they have ever seen before. Now, when he says shock, I'm not sure if he's insinuating that this armada is going to like unleash hell on Venezuela or not, but he's certainly using threatening words. Continuing Trump's tweet from today, until such a time as they return to the United States, all of the oil, land, and other assets that they previously stole from us, the illegitimate Maduro regime is using the oil from these stolen oil fields to finance themselves, drug, terrorism, human trafficking, murder, and kidnapping. For the theft of our assets and many other reasons, including terrorism, drug smuggling, and human trafficking, the Venezuelan regime has been designated as a foreign terrorist organization, and therefore today I am ordering a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela. So that drops a few more hints, you know, when he's tying in terrorism and drug smuggling and human trafficking in that tweet. That ties in a few more hints about what may have actually been on the tanker that was seized last week. I'm a little bit personally confused about him talking about Venezuela stealing American oil, land, and other assets. I believe like Venezuela is the country with the big oil reserves, I believe, inland. Now, maybe he's talking about oil in the Gulf Coast, perhaps. I have no idea why he's saying they have stolen our land. Someone maybe explain that one to me in the comments, what Trump meant by that. You know, I realize when I'm doing these lives, like I'm not really reading the comments. I don't have Nick Fuentes' little like robot voice that pops in when I get super chats. But I may in this video try to pause and go back and forth to seeing some of your guys' comments. Yeah, someone's bringing up like Nick Fuentes doesn't talk about the full picture on a lot of different subjects, which is definitely true. You know, he's not a truther. He's a right-wing influencer that has some radical opinions that aren't really, you know, that far-fetched, but yeah, his delivery. But he doesn't get into a lot of truther subjects that like we do here. So that's why he's more mainstream, to be honest. You know, you're allowed to be racist in the mainstream, but you're not allowed to call out like secret societies in the mainstream. Like, what does Nick say about secrets? Freaking, he's a Catholic. I mean, come on, you can't be a truther and be a Catholic. And he says he eats McDonald's all the time. So let's not get back on Nick. Come on. So yeah, it should be interesting. There's a good chance what Trump announces tomorrow could have something to do with Venezuela, or the other subjects I mentioned before. But all of those ships there, like he said, the biggest armada in history of South America. It would seem that some action may be taken imminently. I know in my last video I said I don't think there would be a war necessarily, but it's certainly a show of force. And, he could have just driven them all there just as a threat to put pressure and get what he wants without having to use too much force. Or, we could see like a lightning strike on certain facilities. And I do not think it will be like protracted ground, like another Iraq invasion, however. So I'll stick to that opinion. Now, we're getting into some of what I was calling in the beginning the MAGA qualms. And this was a big one. A lot of the people questioning MAGA were posting this information about the NDAA that passed and just saying, like, why the hell are we still financing Ukraine and Israel? So the U.S. House passes $900 billion military spending budget. And this is Publius saying, did you vote for this? Well, we're all about make America great again, all about America first. But you got to remember, one of America's biggest GDP contributors is probably the defense industry. And so the defense industry is all tied in with that NDAA. And if we're going to be financing our military, like they want as much money as they can possibly get from other countries too. So when we're giving Ukraine $800 million and Israel $692 million, I believe it's under the assumption that a lot of that will go back to American companies like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. And so in a way, I wouldn't say necessarily that's like America first, but it might actually be helping American companies. Now, in a way, that's also handing American taxpayer money to American companies serving other countries. But at the same time, it would be increasing America's GDP for those companies. So, I mean, I'm not for it, but that's how you could rationalize it. And at the same time, I've said, even with Q and the whole White Hat operation, we still have the military industrial complex, and that's exactly what this is. The NDAA is the definition of the military industrial complex. So as long as we have a for-profit military, we're going to be selling weapons to other countries. And it's going to be the countries that are involved in war, logically. So yeah, I don't agree with it, but that's the state of our world. It may have something to do with, us even just being a capitalist nation and having a permanent standing army, which was not ever supposed to be. It wasn't written in the Constitution that we should not have a standing army, but it was talked about a lot with our founding fathers and in the Federalist Papers about the dangers of having a standing army and these for-profit military corporations that lobby in Congress. So that's what you get. We need a more systemic solution to ever move past the military-industrial complex. And so the second little MAGA qualm here, which I think is a little bit misleading in the way this article is presented. But this was an article saying that the Maha administration bails out big seed oil. The Trump administration continues a long tradition of subsidizing the things it tells Americans to eat less of. So the theme here was that the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, was announcing a $12 billion bailout of America's farmers to be paid for by the new tariff revenues. And so the Department of Agriculture is going to give tariff money to farmers that produce the crops that create seed oils, specifically like rapeseed. And because the tariffs have been hurting their profits. So because of tariffs, I believe these companies, I'm not even sure how tariffs would be hurting their profits. Like, or I guess maybe because other countries are being tariffed, they're not going to be buying our seeds as much anymore. And so these seed oils have seen a dent in their profit margins, or seed oil crop producers. Anyways, they need a bailout, and so they're going to get some money. But the misleading thing about this article is that I was even just double checking with Grok. Well, here, let's read a little bit more here. Among those eligible for the new bailout will be growers of corn, sunflower, canola, rapeseed, and safflower. That is to say, the growers of the most common seed oils or seeds used in seed oils. On the other hand, the Trump administration is encouraging Americans to consume fewer seed oils through policy nudges and the government's bully pulpit. On the other hand, it's bailing out the producers of the products it wants Americans to consume less of. Well, I believe, now don't quote me on this, but if they're seeing a dent in their profits because of tariffs, I believe that would be for crops and potentially seed oils they would be shipping out of the country. But at the same time, RFK is doing everything he can. First of all, it's deceptive to use RFK's picture as the header of this article when this is not even his department. And this is what I was double checking with Grok regarding, does the Secretary of Agriculture report to the HHS director? The answer is no. The Secretary of Agriculture is a completely separate cabinet level role. So this picture, it's showing RFK because he's the one in the administration the only one that knows anything about health, fitness, and wellness, essentially. Everyone else is chowing down McDonald's and seed oils every day. But yes, it seems to be a conflict within the administration between the Department of Agriculture and the Health and Human Services about, the strategy. It's just like a conflict of interest, essentially, which, happens a lot in bureaucracies, conflict of interest between different departments. Agriculture is trying to keep our farmers from going bankrupt, and MAHA is, trying to get American healthy. But I do have to say that if we're going to make America great again, at some point, some of these shitbag companies, Illuminati companies that have been poisoning America for decades, are going to have to take a cut in their profits, especially companies like Coca-Cola, McDonald's. It's like these companies, they're going to have to go bankrupt. I mean, if I was president, I would order airstrikes on corporate McDonald's and Coca-Cola and Tyson and a lot of these other ones that have just been poisoning people willy-nilly for half a century of poisoning and dumbing down Americans. And we don't need these companies. It's like Coca-Cola is completely unnecessary product. Not a single person in America is going to die of thirst without Coca-Cola. Now with seed oil is even more complicated because this is ingredients in so many different products, all processed food that no one should be eating. But it's like we have to essentially do a managed bankruptcy or a controlled demolition of a lot of our agriculture and big food industries to ever be healthy again. And we need to have substitutes. There needs to be more organic grocery stores, more organic restaurants, and organic fast food outlet. For the first time in history would be nice. It's like organic and fast food, it doesn't even sound right in the same phrase, does it? But why not? You know what I mean? Why not be able to have organic food that's pre-prepared and convenient to be purchased at a rest stop on the highway? It's it requires a massive infrastructure build out, but considering we already have all the McDonald's and Burger Kings and Wendy's lining all of our highways already, it would almost make more sense if those companies could be hijacked or rewired to serve healthy food instead of bombing their headquarters. If I was president or dictator, we might make some decisions that we regret. But it might make more sense to like retool some of these existing companies, change the regulations so that they are not allowed to serve such unhealthy food anymore versus, creating whole new startups. But, why should the executives of companies that have poisoned America for 50 years profit at all from, having, a whole new food infrastructure that's organic and healthy when they should be probably put in prison or executed? So that's just a little conflict between bureaucracies there. And then last MAGA qualm here was an article I read titled "Inside the Invitation-Only Stock Market for the Wealthy." And this was from Wall Street Journal, talking about the busiest private companies are being sold to create, the busiest private companies are being sold to a select few as the universe of stocks everyone else can invest in shrinks rapidly. It's a little bit of a confusing way to state that, I think. But essentially what they're saying here is that there's a lot of companies that only offer their stocks in private circles of elitists that aren't listed on the stock exchange. Actually, the number of stocks on the stock exchange has been decreasing. The number of publicly tradable companies has been decreasing. And the wealthiest people are making these huge profits on sometimes on companies before they go public, others on companies that never even go public. It's just like these secret stock exchanges that you have to have millions of dollars to even hear about. And so this is yet another way how the millionaires and the billionaires are getting richer, how the 1% is getting smaller, and everyone else is not even included, like completely discluded, completely barred from even participating in some of these most profitable stock markets that are out there. And so just to read the first paragraph here, it says this year's largest stock sale was not on the New York Stock Exchange or its uptown rival, the NASDAQ stock market. Instead, it was a $40 billion offering by OpenAI that was available only to investors handpicked by the firm's executive team, including Sam Altman himself. Fewer than 50 investors snagging shares. So, I mean, this confirms even more what I've known for a long time. The stock market is rigged. And even the rigged public stock market that you are permitted to participate in is not even the one where you're going to make the big profits of companies that are, high potential upstarts, or even, well-established ones that simply aren't listed publicly. So just to understand how things work, and, what's MAGA doing about that? Absolutely nothing. So before we get to the good news, the bullish on MAGA news, I want to do a little promo for D.S.M.P. And the first thing I want to mention is that we are having
Truth seekers, are you ready to uncover the secrets they don't want you to know? At dsmp.io, we're not just a store. We're a portal to the unknown, prints and posters that unveil hidden truths, from ancient mysteries to modern cover-ups. Fill your space with tapestries woven with cosmic secrets, Tap into the energy of hand-selected crystals to awaken your mind. Explore exclusive packets packed with forbidden knowledge. Cleanse your body and spirit with products designed to strip away the toxins of a corrupted world. In the chaos of today, we give you the tools to stay sharp and to stay awakened. This is more than shopping. This is a movement. Step through the portal. Discover the truth. dsmp.io. Truth disguised as art.
dsmp.io, launching the new website any day now. But the current website is active until the new one launches. So let's get bullish on MAGA. And we had a wild presentation last Friday in the Oval Office with apparently the hockey team from 1980 coming in to celebrate, I believe, them like minting a coin related to a big hockey win over Russia in 1980, which seems quite random. But the whole hockey team came in wearing these giant white cowboy hats. They gave Trump a hat. He put it on. He said, "Oh, we got to get a photo shoot of this." And so this is 𝕯𝖚𝖚 Trumpo at Poppy Trumpo on X, which some people actually say is Donald Trump's like covert, essentially trolling account. But he's saying like, love those big, beautiful white hats. It's like they're giving us comms to reassure us that the white hats are a real thing, that Trump is cognizant of it, that a lot of other people are on board. I even question if this is really the actual hockey team from 1980 or if these are all like special forces behind him, to be honest. I'm being dead serious. I was like, it's not just because I don't know anything about hockey, but I'm like, it's just so the whole thing seems very random and strange. Like with everything going on in the world, to be like bringing in the hockey team from 1980 because they won against Russia. Like, it seems like there's even more probably. If I watched this whole press conference, there's probably a lot of other comms like embedded in there. But the white hat comm was really the obvious one. And so we got like a great photo shoot of Trump in the giant white hat. Like once again, you know, follows up on Melania wearing the big white hat back in 2018, I believe. Different shape, but it's a very clear signal. You know, this could have been any color cowboy hat, and like they just handed out all giant white ones. So making it as obvious as it can possibly be. And some people have even made comparisons to this, I believe you call it the bearable guy, which is this character in the XRP riddle realm. It's a very similar hat. I mean, you could just say it's a cowboy hat, and his isn't white necessarily, but if you look at the shape of it, it's a very similar aesthetic. And so, you know, this could even have ties into like the XRP mythology. Either way, it's, you know, bullish for the white hats and MAGA. At least Trump's trying to maintain the appearance of that there is like a secret operation happening and white hats behind the scenes, because, you know, even the term white hats is never used in the mainstream media. It's like this is really within Q lore. A lot of the Q lore is seeming to be accurate. Now this is to do with a senator. Tim Shealy introduces a bill to hold soft on crime judges accountable. Was reported last week. Actually, I'm saying here November 20th, so this is a little bit older news, and this is just a bill that has been introduced. I need to check on the progress of it, but this is one of my main concerns, at least like locally, and in a lot of different cities, is the big problem of I chose this image of the judge like intentionally of like these types of judges, and not just African American ones, but like the liberal Caucasian women as well. Any type of judge, there's just a lot of them out there. We know Soros has had his fingers in selecting DAs, possibly in judge elections as well. And it needs to be addressed of repeat criminals that are being arrested for crimes, let out on minimal bail, and then they commit more crimes, including murder. And who is responsible? Well, Tim Shealy is saying that the judge should in some way be held responsible if, I'm not sure, like, their peer judge is going to like sentence the other judge for not judging correctly. Like this, there might be a few holes in this, but it's something that needs to be addressed, certainly, of this lack of accountability of these judges being soft on crime and causing more crime to occur. So Senator Tim Shealy, I believe it says today, but possibly November 20th or around then, introduced a Judicial Accountability for Irresponsible Leniency Act, and the acronym for that is JAIL. So a JAIL Act to allow for civil action against judges and other government entities who release violent criminals without bail. So the way that's written, saying civil action, that would be like perhaps a civil lawsuit. So it's like the judge won't be, have her hand chopped off or anything, or, be sentenced to prison perhaps. But if your son or daughter or relative is murdered by someone who has multiple prior convictions and has been released multiple times, you could then potentially sue the judge. Good luck suing a judge. I mean, come on. But the idea here is right, is that there needs to be some form of accountability, whether it's from the judge or having the judge deposed. We really need in this country to, as the truth movement and as MAGAs, we need to really look into who is picking these judges. How are these judges getting selected? How are these judges getting installed? We need to look into the whole process of who even gets on the ballot, because it has definitely been corrupted in all of our cities. And the judges are a big part of the problem of why the police can't do their job. It's a problem in a lot of cities, from the police to city hall to the judges. It's a three-pronged problem in some ways, but I think the police are somewhat the least culpable, and that it really is the city management and the judges in a lot of these cases that are really causing the problems of a lot of people responsible. So this is really big news for XRP and Ripple, was that Ripple has been approved by the OSOCC to charter the Ripple National Trust Bank. The OSOCC is the U.S. Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. And that is massive. I mean, it brings so much legitimacy to Ripple itself. And this was Brad Garlinghouse tweeting about it. Huge news. Ripple just received conditional approval from the whatever, to charter Ripple National Trust Bank. This is a massive step forward. First, for RLUSD, setting the highest standard for stablecoin compliance with both federal, OCC, and state oversight. To the banking lobbyists, your anti-competitive tactics are transparent. You've complained that crypto isn't playing by the same rules, but here's the crypto industry directly under the OCC supervision and standards, prioritizing compliance, trust, and innovation for the benefit of consumers. What are you so afraid of? So that is bullish news for Ripple. XRP, I can't really be bullish on RLUSD since it's a stable coin, but it's looking very positive. In other, I would say, positive news for crypto, the Terra Luna founder was sentenced to 15 years in jail in U.S. court. Now, Terra Luna was a crypto coin. I believe it was an exchange, not just a coin, like an exchange with their own coin that crashed big time. How many years ago was that? In 2022. And now some people have had qualms with the Trump administration, saying that they are lenient on financial crimes in crypto, specifically citing the pardon that Trump gave to the Binance founder. But I don't believe that the Binance founder really, I haven't looked into it in great detail, but Binance is it's one of the biggest exchanges, has a pretty good reputation. Now, it's always possible any of these exchanges could go the way of FTX, and I need to double check if Terra Luna was actually an exchange or just a coin, but any of these exchanges could go down. But Binance has been fairly reliable, and so Trump pardoned the CEO of Binance from allegations of corruption, essentially, for money laundering through the exchange. And so people were saying that this administration is being like soft on crypto crime. However, we are seeing the Terra Luna founder getting 15 years in jail, sentenced in a U.S. court. The crypto founder, 𝕯𝖊𝖚 was sentenced to 15 years in prison over 40 billion collapse of Terra Luna. 𝖚 founded Terraform Labs and developed the Terra USD and Terra and Luna currencies, pleaded guilty and admitted to misleading investors. 𝕯𝖊𝖚, the South Korean cryptocurrency entrepreneur behind two digital currencies, lost an estimated 40 billion in 2022, was sentenced on Thursday to 15 years in prison for what the judge called epic fraud. The U.S. district judge handed down the sentence, sharply rebuked 𝖚 for repeatedly lying to everyday investors who trusted him with their life savings. This was a fraud on an epic generational scale, he said. In the history of federal prosecutions, there are few frauds that have caused so much harm as you have, Mr. 𝖚, Engelmeyer, the judge, said during the hearing in Manhattan federal court. So don't tell me the Trump administration is being soft on crypto. Now, this judge is not part of the Trump administration, but it's like we're still figuring out this whole crypto regulatory situation, and XRP has obviously gone through the most loops to prove that they're upstanding and legitimate and regulated properly. All these different exchanges are different situations in every different exchange. And so, just because someone succeeds in laundering money through an exchange, I don't necessarily believe that the CEO of the exchange should be held responsible. It's like, I guess it's kind of like a bank, but at the same time, crypto is a lot more anonymous. At the same time, a lot of these exchanges do have KYC, which is know your customer. So they should be, I don't know, I have to look into the Binance situation a little bit deeper, but it's like people aren't just getting away with crypto crimes, especially like the big ones. And so I think there needs to be a more regulation around smaller crypto crimes, like not just 40 billion, but there's scammers, right and left in crypto that I think eventually we need some kind of like crypto FBI that, you can, if you do get scammed, you can really report it. They really look into it. On the blockchain, everything is documented, and like when someone gets frauded, it should be looked into. We should know the country, the location, and, we should be able to, get your fraud back potentially like the way you can on a credit card, or there should be some kind of insurance. Like, I don't know if credit cards really get your actual money back, or they're just, guarantee they pay you back if you lost money. But it's a little scary in crypto sometimes, since transactions are not generally reversible, but they are all traceable. So here is, this one I gotta say is kind of the doozy. I could have done a whole video about this. Government intelligence officer. This is the cryptid disclosure I was talking about in the beginning. Government intelligence officer assigned to secret UFO investigation said a wolf-like creature that walked on two legs appeared at his East Coast home. So yes, you might, the picture here is not accurate. Like, we're talking about either a werewolf or a dog man. And this is in the mainstream media. This is Daily Mail. I found this article because it was linked on the homepage of Drudge Report, of all places. So I'm sure there has been news articles referencing allegations of wolfmen or dogmen before. I don't know of it. I've never read one before, to be honest. But I'm saying, like, if you looked in the history of all news articles, I'm sure it's been reported before. But to report it from a government intelligence officer and have it linked on the homepage of Drudge Report is pretty shocking to me, at least. So just to read one little paragraph from this article, Dr. James 𝕯𝖚𝖚𝖚𝖘 an intelligence analyst previously with the Defense Intelligence Agency, revealed that during his time investigating UFOs, many witnesses recalled paranormal experiences after seeing the objects. We realize that people who openly say, I observed a UFO close up, maybe on the ground, that they always seem to have a paranormal connection in some ways. If you gently push them, 𝕯𝖚𝖚𝖚𝖘 told investigator journalist George Knapp in a recent interview, blah, blah, blah. So essentially what this article was saying was that people involved in like studying these UFOs, even people that had seen UFOs way out in the West, I believe in like Nevada. I sent this article to Jessica Jones from the Cryptid Huntress, and she was super interested in it because like, that's how unusual this is to see this type of thing in the mainstream media. Like she actually got way more excited about it than I even expected. And she like made it like the first thing she reported on her video like 2 nights ago. And she went into a lot of detail about it. But essentially, when people see these UFOs or, have possibly abduction experiences, sometimes they have what you call like a hitchhiker phenomenon, in which you can go like multiple states away from where your UFO or paranormal experience occurred, and the paranormal phenomenon seemed to follow you. It's occurred where, I believe it's talked about in that article actually, people that were involved in these UFO studies in Nevada or Utah or wherever it was, go back to the East Coast, and then they're seeing like light orbs in their home. And this one individual who, worked for DIA, like he said, literally saw like a werewolf or a wolf man like outside of his house. And like this is being reported in the mainstream media as fact. So there is some crazy stuff out there. I know like I haven't really put cryptids on any of my diagrams, but it's definitely a very interesting subject. And if you're interested, I would watch more from Cryptid Huntress on YouTube and Rumble. This is an image of a cryptid known as a pill crawler, which are super creepy looking. And so, people don't know if some of these are organisms that, live underground, were maybe developed by the military and released. You see them definitely more in certain hotspots, like spiritual or like dark spiritual hotspots in national parks and such. They don't generally come into neighborhoods. They more live in like the rural and forested regions of the country. But I'm starting to believe more and more in werewolves, dogmen, pale creepers, Wendigo. Like there's a bunch of, you're like not even supposed to say the word Wendigo, I think, but like something about it. Like there's some like lore that some of these creatures, you're not even supposed to say their name. And like a rake, there's another one called like a rake. So these things are out there, and it's just crazy that they're starting to get reported on more. Now, another article about a breakthrough in physics. And now I have to preface this. I saw this tweet on X and I got pretty excited. When I did a little bit more research, it seems that this discovery may have actually been made back in 2021. But either way, it's pretty shocking and pretty crazy. And even if it was discovered in 2021, we haven't necessarily seen, the commercial impact of this type of science and physics. But essentially, this was saying that physicists recently created matter from pure light, proving Einstein's 90-year-old theory of E=mc² right in the lab. And I believe this occurred at Brookhaven Lab, which is also one of these hot spots for Black project research of the government. It's one of these national laboratories that may be very much involved in things like cryptids. There's actually quite a bit in and around Long Island, New York, from Brookhaven Lab, which has a particle accelerator on site on Long Island, is most likely connected in many ways to Montauk and the experiments that took place at Montauk, as well as Plum Island, which is also off the coast of Long Island, which has been used as a bioweapons development facility. So there is a lot going on Long Island that, I lived in New York for 11 years and I never knew any of that, was happening out on Long Island. I would probably explore it a lot more, but I'm sure Brookhaven is still very much active. And so they don't like probably explorers. You can actually probably take a public tour of it. Whereas Montauk is completely shut down. But this article was saying that this conversion of energetic light into matter is a direct consequence of Einstein's famous E=mc² equation, which states that energy and matter are interchangeable. Nuclear reactions in the sun and at nuclear power plants regularly convert matter into energy, but now scientists have converted light energy directly into matter in a single step. And so when I was researching this, trying to figure out when this was actually reported, like I said, I saw some articles that were first reporting something similar to this in 2021. But I also saw more recent articles from 2025, July, stating that for the first time, scientists have observed the creation of matter from light. So this may be something that is like ongoing research. But what got me excited about this was, I've probably mentioned in several videos in the past few months, but having seen Tron Ares in theaters 3 times, I was pretty into it because I'm a Nine Inch Nails fan as well as a Tron fan. The big technology in that movie that they sort of revealed is these like lasers that print objects from the digital world into the 3D world. And so I had been doing some research, like, is that a technology that really exists? Like, can you shoot like multiple lasers and actually print, a 3D physical object? And, officially, like Grok was saying no, but, according to these physics, like it should ultimately be possible. It is physically possible. We already have 3D printers, even 3D printers that print metal, but that's printing metal from probably like a tube of metal that's fed into it that's superheated and fine printed. It's not like printing from a laser, which in Tron Ares is called a particle laser. So I was doing some research, like, do particle lasers really exist? And officially no, but this cutting edge scientific research is actually showing that yes, actually it could be physically possible. And so I believe that this would ultimately lead to what we would consider like replicator technology, like what you see in Star Trek. So literally using, in Star Trek, this stuff just kind of appears. Like, I'm not sure like what that technology is necessarily supposed to be. In Tron Ares, it's much more like active and energetic, and there's like sparks flying everywhere. But it gets the job done either way. And so, this could be the beginning of disclosure of essentially like replicator technologies, which of course probably most likely already exist in Black programs. And so it's just like the scientific backing behind some of that technology is slowly trickling down into the public. And so it could still be like a pretty long time before we see, this technological breakthrough integrated into actually commercialized products. Again, this would be another thing that would be extremely disruptive to the current economy. It's like the Department of Agriculture is trying to keep the seed oil producers like employed, but like if we had replicator technology, like this would replace like a lot of things, a lot of factories, a lot of physical goods. It would be a huge upset to the economy, but I think it's possible to have like I don't know if you would call it an economy, if it's like I guess you call it a gift economy is like the official word for it, when like we essentially have abundance and we don't have so much scarcity of physical materials. It's just essentially we use light to print whatever materials we need. So that's very hopeful to me. And, it's just confirming like the real world physics of some of these advanced technologies that we've seen in science fiction. This is a really odd article, but I just thought I would include it because it's kind of funny that Trump has taken the first steps in possible bid to control DC's golf courses. And so, of course, this was written from a liberal perspective of like, Trump's trying to take over the golf courses of DC, but I guess when they excavated the east wing of the White House, they dumped a lot of the soil somewhere on this golf course on one of the rivers in DC. I was doing a little bit of research, like Trump National, Washington, D.C. is pretty far from the city. It's actually 40 minutes from this golf course, which is on an island in the Potomac River. But could Trump be looking into renovating our golf courses? That I think this is a public golf course. And so people are very worried that Trump is going to try to turn the public DC golf course into a private country club. Like that would be the end of the world. But either way, I think Trump, he may not know what the hell he's doing with geopolitics, but he definitely knows golf courses. I'll say that much. And this was the Army-Navy game that happened on Sunday, which Palantir was a big sponsor of. Now, I did not watch the speeches. Usually there's a lot of comms at the Army-Navy game. Of course, Trump was there. He flipped the coin. You know, the Army and Navy, clearly big fans, big Trump fans. Now, we're running into 1 hour, 11 minutes, so we're going to wrap it up fairly quickly here. But the Bondi Beach attack, 12/15, we had two supposedly Muslim shooters attacking a Hanukkah celebration on the beach with 15 dead Jews. And it's just so much anti-Semitism. My first thought was like, okay, who cares? No, just kidding. But then when I heard it was 𝕯𝖊𝖚𝖚 Jews celebrating Hanukkah, I was like, okay, really, who cares? No, just kidding. Anyways, this picture has been going around online. And of course, you know, I'm not sure if it's AI or not, but it's supposedly showing one of the supposed victims like in hair and makeup with a whole lot of like studio equipment visible in the background. So like, did this even happen? That's why I don't like getting into these shootings anymore, because it's like, it's not just like who done it anymore. Like, was it the deep state or was it like a lone wolf? It's like, did it even happen? Was it a production? Is it just a whole freaking media deception? And most of the time lately, it ends up seeming like it's really just some deception happening, like for some kind of strategic reason. On the surface, you know, the reason is to elicit sympathy for Jews, to put out this perception that anti-Semitism's on the rise, which of course Nick Fuentes isn't helping, and neither is the Gaza invasion helping. But on a deeper level, you know, is this the White Hat staging this for some reason? And, you know, there was quite a bit of footage of this came out with, you know, unusual things happening, you know, unusual police response. So we'll just have to see if anything else comes out. But, you know, it's not going to be too consequential either way at the end of the day. You know, these things always happen. And I mean, relative to the global population, it affects a very small number of people. And this particular individual with the bald head and the blood everywhere, supposedly he was a victim of October 7th as well, or like he was present on October 7th and then happened. Like, what's the chances that he would be present on October 7th in Israel and then also present at this random beach shooting in Australia 2 years later? And who even celebrates Hanukkah on a beach is my other question. Apparently, some 𝕯𝖊𝖚𝖚s do celebrate Hanukkah on a beach, but I don't have too much more insights into that. This was Trump yesterday declaring fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction, with all these high-ranking generals, military people behind him. And so they're definitely getting very serious on the fent. And, I would agree with that. It kills a lot of people. And it's also tainted in a lot of things that people don't even think are Fent, and has killed a lot of our youth. And terrible thing, the Fent. Always test for Fent. One of our last little articles here. Well, we have a couple other things. Robert Riener. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name, but pretty horrific story of them being found stabbed to death in their Hollywood home, and revealed that it was their son, who has a drug problem, that stabbed them. And now Twitter is all in a frenzy because apparently Barack and Michelle Obama were scheduled to meet director Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle, the very same night they were killed. So this is seeming very suspicious, and I think it might have something to do with the Epstein files that may be coming out soon. And on the surface level as well, it's pretty clear that there's a potential that this son may have been subject to some kind of like incestual pedophilia as the reason he killed them. That's sort of the first conclusion people kind of are jumping to. Now, I have a very long tweet here posted by Ariel going into a lot of detail about this. Maybe I'll read a few paragraphs because, like, I've seen some of the movies that Rob Reiner made. I've seen him act in a few of the movies as well, like Wolf of Wall Street. He actually was, I believe, director of this one, A Few Good Men, which includes the scene Jack Nicholson saying, "You can't handle the truth." So there's some weird connections there. Apparently he was either involved or created Castle Rock Studio, which a lot of people say that was involved in producing the Biden administration. So I've only really I mean, this just happened like yesterday, so I have not researched this in too much depth. But let me read a couple paragraphs of what Ariel had to say, because apparently Robert Reiner was a real dirtbag. And then Trump tweeted about him and said that he had Trump derangement syndrome, and everyone's up in arms saying, Trump shouldn't be insulting the recently deceased. But, he's insulting them for a reason, and it's most likely because this guy had a very bad track record. So this is Ariel tweeted, Rob Reiner was a fat, smug Hollywood parasite who lectured America on morality while his drug-addicted son Nick festered in the streets like trash. That same worthless spawn ended up butchering him and his wife in their own bed, proving blood doesn't lie when it comes to raising monsters. Reiner virtue signaled about saving children with his bullshit Proposition 10 cash grab, yet he funneled millions into shady nonprofits that trafficked vulnerable children straight to the elite pedophile parties. This hypocritical pig built his saintly image on the raped futures of fostered youth he pretended to care about. Well, Ariel's going real hard on that. Like, I don't really have anything to corroborate any of that. But, anyone that's like this deep in Hollywood, that's, actor in a lot of big movies, director in a lot of big movies, you can kind of just even look at him and see that he's a little bit creepy, to be honest. But, Ariel's, like, could be really defamation. Like, I have no proof, but Ariel's saying he attended elite parties where minors got drugged and assaulted for the amusement of Hollywood's elite, logging in but pretending he saw nothing. So, I mean, I don't know how Ariel knows all this, but yeah, I think just like the whole situation is a little bit sketch. It reminds me of, who are those brothers that had like the TV show made about them that killed their parents? Sounds a little bit similar situation, possibly. It's like when the parents abuse the children, they're more likely to get murdered by the children. So, and like if the kid like ran away at 15 and was doing drugs, like why would you run away from your family if there wasn't something pretty wrong with the family life? So wrapping this up here is Trump once again declaring that tomorrow will be a big announcement at 9 p.m. Hopefully it's not just another holiday NFT collection. I hate when Trump says he's going to make a big announcement and it ends up being an NFT collection, it's always a little disappointing. But there's enough going on in the world. I think that it should be something fairly spicy. And so, yeah, I've already sort of mentioned, I mentioned actually beginning, what I was going to say last here was these potential booms coming up of the Three-Eye Atlas the following day, making its closest pass to Earth, December 18th, which of course NASA's MAVEN spacecraft lost contact with Earth after a close encounter with Three-Eye Atlas, raising new questions as the interstellar object approaches Earth. Epstein release on Friday. Winter solstice on the 21st, dark to light. And some people are saying that this is going to begin a fairly dramatic process of deep state obliteration that could potentially be wrapped up by around Easter if we're following spiritually significant dates and holidays, that this period between winter solstice and Easter 2026 could be a big cleanup period, all in preparation for the 250-year anniversary by July 4th, which Trump has promised will be a year-long celebration, which I believe we should already be in. You know, we should be having our world's fairs and scientific breakthrough exhibitions, but I'm not saying too much of that yet. Maybe it's been postponed till after the actual 250-year anniversary when the deep state's fully obliterated. So we'll just have to see. They released this picture of the staff, which, you know, people are getting pretty like hyped up over, like some of Trump's most loyal staff in this administration looking fairly badass. Now, Stephen Miller and Dan Scavino are part of the original Q group, and a lot of people really dislike Susie Wiles and say she's a Zionist. And these three, I'm not sure who this one is. Maybe he's part of the Q group as well. But anyways, I think Trump trusts these people pretty well, and it seems like it's going pretty well. Now, one other really odd thing I just want to mention. So I have been working on my sovereignty related map, which is going to be titled the Sovereignty Certificate. It's my new map. And I discovered something, and I've been doing a lot of research into a lot of different subjects, not just about sovereignty, but in the process of creating this map, it's another map that's supposed to resemble currency. So I've always been really fascinated by the intricacy of currency, like as a print designer, and even previously as like a portrait artist, the intricacy of currency has always been a fascination of mine. And I've been looking into how currency is actually made, especially in the past, like how in the past, like in the 1800s, because, you know, when you look at currency today, it's very intricate and beautiful, but there's a whole bunch of other designs, you know, from the past 100 years and more that are almost equally as intricate and beautiful. And I've been looking into how those are actually created. Well, it's a process called intaglio engraving. And I was looking into how in the 1800s do they shrink something down so small, because like in the level of detail that it's engraved, it had to be made bigger and then shrunk down. So what I found out is there is a machine called a pantograph. And when I looked up what this machine looks like, I was shocked, because as we know, what you see here is the Masonic compass and square, which are two tools used in architecture, which is, you know, the main focus of Masonry. You know, well, original Masonry, like the Masonic guilds were all about construction, architecture, Masonry itself, you know, not like the... Anyways, Masonry evolved into more of like a theoretical Masonry. But, you know, they still use this symbol of the compass and square, like these are two very important tools. Well, I was shocked to discover that the actual device of a pantograph, which is used to shrink down engraved designs from a large scale to like a small scale, like on a coin, looks exactly like the shape of a compass in square. And not only does it look like the shape of a compass in a square, it's permanently in that configuration. So you're not even really seeing it here. I'll have to show you. Let me see if I can get something to show up here, like in a rapid manner that actually shows you like the motion of it. It shouldn't be too hard. There it is. Ba-boom. So, okay, I know it's covering my face, but you see how that works is it essentially traces the small one to make it bigger, or in reverse, it would trace the big one to make it smaller. And so this is like one of the bankers' probably like secret tools. I mean, an artist tool, or maybe even also a architect's tool of scaling designs. And so I just thought, I mean, officially, like the compass and square of masonry has nothing to do with the pantograph, but you know, maybe secretly it does. Like maybe masonry is all tied into like some of these like bankers like secret ways to make currency and make unreplicatable currencies and paper currencies. It's like part of their whole trickery of Babylonian money magic and fractional reserve banking that it's like a Jew thing. Just kidding. It's like yeah, like the Rothschilds and the Masons are all interconnected. You know, obviously the compass and square fits into the Star of David quite well. Sometimes people say like Masonry is Judaism for Gentiles. But I just found that quite interesting. You know, this isn't the best picture because you're not seeing it head on, but in that video I just played, you were seeing it more head on. And you know, from an overhead view, it looks exactly like a compass and square. And so I'm wondering, like, does masonry, is their actual symbol have more to do with scaling designs and scaling artwork for currency, like this, like the way this is an engraving made by Grok? Is that have more to do with it than the compass and square? Like, is the essentially what I'm saying is the compass and square actually a pantograph machine in disguise? So I'll let you think about that one for a while. All right, guys. Well, this is one of my longer videos, hour 30 minutes. We've covered a lot, and we should have a lot more to cover by the end of the week because, like I said, you know, whether this is going to be something happening in Venezuela, something to do with 2020, it's not over yet, something to do with major geological events or widespread devastation, something to do with aliens, something to do with Three-Eye Atlas. There's a lot of possibilities. I think between all of those, it'll probably be one of those, but it could also be a complete blind box mystery surprise. And so we'll see what the Maestro says tomorrow. We'll see how much blackout there is on the Epstein files. We'll see if Robert Reiner is included, if that has anything to do with Obama. A lot could be hitting the fan in rapid manner this week, and so we should have plenty to talk about next week. We may even have to do another video this week before the end if a lot of stuff goes down. But like I said, I am trying to get the sovereignty map done, which is part of the reason I didn't do a video last week. And we're also trying to launch the new website. And so we're very busy with those two things. But if stuff goes down, I will take a break and give you A145's opinion on it. So one last time, make sure to check out dsmp.io and use the code SANTA17 for a 30% discount on the paper printed products. Enjoy the booms later this week, and we'll see you on the next video.